Welcome, everybody. Today's topic is digital transformation, digital versus transformation, and how to make sure your digital investments and upgrades really are rooted in digital strategy and your overall business strategy, and how your role as leaders impact the outcomes of your initiatives. So, for our usual format that we follow is we invite Randall Craig, Brain Trust Professional CEO, to come share a few words to get us primed for a higher order conversation. And then we flip into questions from you and from me. And Randall's in the hot seat. He never has any idea what questions I've cooked up for him or from you. So, but first, a little bit about Randall. Randall has founded several successful startups. He's held a long time position at a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive at an American public company, the author of 8 books. In the Speaker Hall of Fame, he's a master facilitator. He's helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow their businesses with executive coaching, leadership retreat facilitation, and conversations to align teams. So, Randall, do you want to get us started? What key ideas, what bedrock thoughts should we have to start this conversation on digital transformation?
So first of all, let's just talk about strategic digital transformation and let's like excise completely the word digital from that and talk about strategic transformation. So I think one of the biggest problems I've seen organizations do is they've spent their time focusing on the digital part of it and not actually thinking about the business itself. And as a result of that, they've been captive often to many vendors who say, well, my particular technology is going to transform your organization. And certainly in years past, I've been called by some fairly major organizations who said, I bought such and such to do digital transformation. I'm thinking, what the heck? That is not something that's going to transform anything. That's just going to add some capability one way or the other. And so what I think we need to start off is to say, how might we think about transforming a business and why we might want to do that first? Okay. And if we think back in history, um, how many buggy manufacturers really made it in the automotive age, right? Okay. How many pre-internet organizations truly were not transformed by that particular technology or mobile for that matter? But it's not just a question of saying, okay, we're going to apply a technology onto an organization and therefore it'll be different. It'll be slightly faster or more effective or more collaborative or something like that. But when we're talking about transformation, we're often talking about how this actually impacts the strategy of the organization. And in a certain sense, what I'd like to do is flip it upside down and say, instead of saying, the board and the senior people or the owner or the founder, they set the strategy. And then, I'm going to talk about larger organizations for a moment. The HR department will do the HR strategy, and the operations group will do the operations strategy. And thank you, the technology people will do the technology strategy, and so on and so forth down sort of through the ranks, right? Um, but I think, we're at the point right now where we can say perhaps some of these things that are going on within the particular departments can inform the overall strategy. Okay. And also, there's a whole bunch of stuff external to the organization that should affect the strategy and actually might change it. And probably the biggest one today is the issue of AI. Because if we think about AI as being, transformative, then we can't just say, well, it's the IT department that can figure out how we can use AI to make our business better, etc. It's really more a strategic question, not one that's just relegated to a particular department, whether it's marketing or IT or HR or any of the other parts of the world. Pardon me. So that's probably where I wanted to start is to say, well, these things are inputs. We would deal with the strategy first. And once we've got the strategy, then we can say, okay, where does digital come in to transform it? And so just so we're talking beyond just theory, if you will, let me give you a practical example of this. There's a lot of agencies out there, marketing agencies, ad agencies, of that kind of genre. And a lot of them spend a lot of their time actually writing on behalf of their clients. They do copywriting, they'll do analytical writing, they'll do this writing on behalf of. How long do you think it will take their clients to say, you know what? Well, let me do it the other way around. how long will it be before the management of that agency says, we can use AI to make our processes more efficient and we could do it faster and faster and faster. And therefore our margins will be much better because we'll charge the same and we'll do it, in a faster way. But on the other hand, you know, the strategic transformative thinker at the client side will say, you know something, I don't know if we really need that agency to do most of that work. I think AI can do that kind of for us. And therefore, effectively, that agency for at least that part of the work gets disintermediated and removed from the equation completely. Does it not make sense to take a look at some of this um, new technology as an example, as a way to kick us in the butt and say, okay, how might we actually change our business, right? How might we serve our members if it's a membership organization in a different way, rather than just incrementally making it better and better and better and better and better and better and better. Um, Another example, and I've used this before when talking about this subject. Toyota is probably one of the most impressive automakers in the world, except for and by the way, what they're very, very good at is continuous improvement, Kaizen. And the idea is that every year that Toyota Corolla gets better and better and better and better by 1%. And it doesn't take many decades before all these 1% add up to be a substantially better car than everybody else's until, that is, we've got that transformative impact of EVs, right? And so where in the world has Toyota been relative to, say, Tesla, okay, over the last number of years? Yes, now, 2025, 2026, yeah, there's lots of EVs from Toyota. However, they just stuck to doing incremental change without taking a look and saying, gee, what kind of disruption in that marketplace might we be aware of, or that actually as a market leader we might drive in order to make sure that we're at the forefront of our customers' minds, not sort of trying to catch up, as has been the case with Toyota. So the jury's out as to whether EVs will have the staying power in a completely different way. I mean, there's so many factors involved. Okay, but the idea of the Toyota board not considering that, right? And deciding just to do an incrementalist strategy, that's the problem with only looking at these things as outputs to a strategic output as opposed to an input to them and so on. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. I know this is it kind of sounds, like big, 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 big. But I've got a lot more to say but I think it's better just we go right to questions and see what people have to say. So
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Randall. I'm ready to jump in. For those that showed up live, the time is yours. If you have any questions, put up your Zoom hand, come on mic, type it in the chat. If you can't come on camera, no problem. I will get us started with the first question, Randall. Okay. You said we start with strategy, and then where does digital come in? Okay, this is great. Almost every organizational leader will tell you we have a strategy when it comes to digital for sure, but usually they do not have a strategy. What they usually have is a plan or a series of plans. So I'm curious to ask you, Randall, if the first ingredient is strategy, like what is the test you use for yourself and your clients? Like, aha, this is genuine strategy here.
So this is different. If I'm talking to entrepreneurial leaders, which I do an awful lot, sometimes the focus is so much on cash flow, or sometimes the focus is a new go-to-market into a new product launch, or whatever it happens to be, right? Or looking for those next set of key hires, right? So it's very tactical, and then gee, we're going to put together a plan, right? We're going to do that 3-year strategy, which, by the way, in a certain sense, sounds like the former Soviet Union's and 5-year plan, where this is exactly kind of what should happen, and of course that never really worked, right? And so the question is, what are you doing really to make sure that that strategy is alive, right? And what I mean by that is this. So find the founder, the president, the CEO, the board, wherever that strategy comes from, fine. This is the strategy. Now it's a question of execution. Well, thank you very much. How do we get that next level of management aligned, right? To make sure that actually everybody's in it and they're able to sort of speak to the rest of the organization, all the touch points that they have to make sure that things actually happen, right? So that's one thing. And by the way, maybe that should happen every year. We used to call them, you know, uh, executive offsites where you go away for a week and you do all these things. Now it's like 2 days or one day. And it's a question of relooking at this and putting in a little bit more raw material about what's actually happening so that the organization becomes more agile in terms of its planning cycles and saying, here's the locked in 3-year plan, as opposed to, for example, a rolling 3-year plan. And one of the things that you might do at this retreat is actually to take a look at it and say, are those scenarios that we looked at before, are they still kind of happening, really? Are there any new things that have come up? Maybe it's some regulatory thing. Maybe it's a new competitor. Maybe it's something like tariffs. Maybe it's something like AI, whatever it is, to make sure that what you're doing is actually alive and relevant. And so that you're a lot more agile as an organization, as opposed to one that's just, following the 3-year plan, right? The strategy. Organizations are dynamic things. Okay, leadership should be a dynamic thing as well. The markets are dynamic. There's so much change happening on almost every dimension, right? And so having a strategy that is set as a North Star is important, but the actual plans to get there need to be able to pivot. And sometimes that North Star has got to shift a bit too. And that's kind of really where for example, that retreat might come in. Or sometimes it's the question of having that great coaching conversation. Okay, and you think, I haven't thought about that. Maybe I should spend that time working on it. So that's how I would answer that one, Rania. Good question.
You guys get priority here. I'm going to keep going, just to keep the hour moving, but please do jump in. Randall, you founded and led multiple digital consulting companies offering both strategy and execution support. You've written extensively about digital and have developed many foundational frameworks to help your clients' readership make sure the digital investment is fruitful. My question to you is, in your experience, are there any themes you have identified around where organizations and leaders and committees that work on these things where they trip up with their digital transformation projects? What are people not seeing?
Oh man, that's such a big question. So let me answer it in a couple of ways. First of all, sometimes um, for the smallest organizations, the most, the spunky innovator entrepreneur, very small, etc. Sometimes they don't have the external support, right? They don't have the whispering in the ear of somebody who's maybe been there, done that. So the raw material is actually not fully baked into plan. Sometimes for the largest organizations, they outsource it to a big consulting firm, which comes in and you've got this wonderful 300 page deck, etc. And that's the strategy. And it's this, and then they leave, okay, or sometimes they keep on staying there, right? Whichever it is, but it's way up here, right? And I think that between those two poles, there's got to be something in between, just to make it real. I think change management is a excuse me, is something that's pretty important. Communication is pretty important. Um, so very often leaders know what they know, but they don't know what they don't know, and therefore they'll make their decisions based on, in terms of the execution, based on their imperfect set of data. And guess what? That's the job of management. But does that data, must it be so imperfect? Is there no way that you could buttress it or de-risk, either by spending time with people who maybe done it before, okay, or by making sure that when you've got the strategy, there's some degree of supports going forward in a way that aren't, just a junior who's kind of been assigned to sort of help you, but they've never actually done anything themselves. Um, I think sometimes the question of what's the learning that actually happens at with all the managers, that's also something that's kind of missed. It's like, okay, the strategy is up here, we kind of know it. Okay, but how about everybody else? So what kind of communication do you have for everybody? Is it an all hands meeting where everybody's given the same message? Is it sort of dripping out some professional development so people are tooled up bit by bit? Is it just-in-time training so that key groups can be empowered to actually bring whatever part of that initiative forward? Is it putting together a bit of a center of excellence or skunk works? Is it, for example, to take the team out let's say for smaller entrepreneurial leaders to take the entire team away for a day or two to say, okay, let's roll up the sleeves. We're so busy on the day to day. Let's take some time working on the business, not in the business, to make sure that we're figuring out how to actually make this kind of thing kind of happen, right? And I think it's also, this sounds kind of weird, but it's also where things fall off the rails is there's always laggards in the business. Somebody who feels uncomfortable with whatever that change is. And let's have conversations and say, okay, are we going to spend most of our time on some of those laggards? Or are we going to spend our time on the leaders, right? And spending the time on the leaders means um, the laggards get to see, things are working out over there, so maybe I can sort of jump on the bandwagon as opposed to spending all of your time on the laggards. And that's kind of a, a disaster because all these people are going to generate all kinds of reasons why things can't happen. And it's tougher. It's a lot more frustrating. So, I think developing the momentum and figuring out how to translate that knowledge to action is part of a key part of the effort.
We have a question in the chat here from Yoav. Thank you for asking. We have a classic change management question. What are some best practices for implementing and executing new strategies for a team? It is easy to lose focus on changes and have momentum stall.
Yeah. So let's just remember one thing. Everybody's got a day job. Okay, you've got a day job. And if I said to you, um, by the way, in addition to what you do every day, we also want you to do all these other things. Well, assuming that you actually have skills in all these other things, something's probably going to fall off the table. Okay. And if you have the usual stuff that you're working on, it's going to be implementing whatever that change happens to be is not going to be done particularly well, or it'll give in short shrift. So the question is if you're going to have a change, making sure that it's staffed up appropriately. So sometimes, for example, it's getting, excuse me, it's taking somebody off a job and saying, okay, your job is to do something rather, and then backfilling it. Sometimes it's to bring in some part-time resources. Okay, a consultant, for example, to do a very specific part in order to make it because of specialized skills. Very often it's a question of saying, okay, so let's just get some coaching in here to make it easier. And so we got knowledge transfer. Sometimes like it could be a whole bunch of different kinds of things, but that's probably communications is probably number one, and making sure its resources are good is probably number two. I think um, the question of executive sponsorship is kind of also, left off the table. If the person who sits in the corner office is not fully behind it, then it's probably not going to happen, right? If, for example, there's not some leader that says, yeah, this is mine, I'm going to clear the way, I'm going to make sure there's some budget for it, I'm going to make sure there's some time. Yes, if there's decisions to be made that you can't make yourself, I'm here to sort of um, deal with that kind of thing. I think that that's also very, very important. And sometimes we go through, and I've seen where it's a kind of a performance thing. So and so is the sponsor, but really they also have other priorities. They're not really doing the sponsor's job. So what is that job? Okay, they've got to understand what it is, and they've got to understand. Same thing with the question in the largest organizations of steering committees and working groups and different ways of socializing stuff across. I think that when I mentioned communications, I think one of the things that's very, very powerful is peer-based case studies where people can say, oh, gee, if so and so could do it, I can do it. Wow, look at that result over there. I bet we could do that over here. Right? So that's something that's also important. I think the other thing that is not a change management thing, but it really should be, I guess it is change management, is a whole question of if there's going to be a change, are there some structural changes that need to happen in order to make that change actually stick? And what do I mean by that? Should there be changes in organizational design? Who reports into who, where, what the accountabilities are? Should there be changes in the management objectives of particular key leaders, right? How about the compensation? What are they bonused on, for example? Right. And so, management objectives and compensation, those happen like once a year, if so. But if we're able to say, well, gee, if we're going to start a particular critical to the organization change management, strategic transformation effort, shouldn't the particular objectives of those leaders involved be aligned? And shouldn't the comp also be aligned? Otherwise, they'll be pulled in different directions, right? Same thing with the organization design. So a good question, you have. Thank you very much. Yeah, I could talk about that one for hours.
Donald, you waving at me or you have a question?
Oh, I have a comment slash question. Uh, Randall, you hit the nail on the head with we don't know about AI. We don't know what we don't know because my experience is that most owners, leaders of small and medium-sized businesses, so I'm talking 5 million to 150 million, just as a point of reference, have no clue. They know that everyone's talking about AI, that they should be doing something, but they don't have a clue. None of the people that I've talked to in that category, and it's dozens of them, have a clue. So I looked up on Chat GPT this. How do I find the right AI consultant for my business? And I was curious to see, and it spit out a whole bunch of tips. But the first tip was define your goals. Clarify what you want to achieve with AI. But then I said, but they don't know what they don't know.
This is the
They
problem with
they can't
AI.
define the goals because they have no clue what all of the things are that AI can do for them. So it's a real issue. Everyone is talking. It's like the weather. Everyone's talking about it, but nobody knows what to do with it.
Yeah, and listen, that's so well said. It's almost humorous. Just the other week, I was on the West Coast giving a keynote with all kinds of leaders of these organizations, small, medium, as well as some large, and pretty much every single one of them was astounded by some of the ideas and concepts that I shared. Astounded. Now, for me, that happens to be in it a little bit. Yeah, that's fine. I kind of know. But it wasn't surprising to me because they were experts in their particular businesses. They knew their organizations, they knew their people, they knew their markets, they knew all that kind of stuff, but they didn't know what they didn't know, right? And so um, this is an easy problem to solve. Okay, for AI, the way to solve the problem actually isn't to ask AI, right? Donald, when you asked AI, who you should call, it probably didn't say call the Brain Trust Professional Institute and Ronnie Francoeur and Randall Craig. Okay, it didn't know that. It did not know that. So therefore, maybe it's a bit off. Um, but I think that um, this is not something we haven't seen before. When I put the Toronto Star on online decades ago, or Globe Investor, or Workopolis, or any of these other like vastly new things, no one had an idea of really what Globe Investor could be. This is no one had any idea about Workopolis or what a newspaper online could be, right? And that's kind of what the intellectual sort of synthesis happens when you've got outsiders and insiders kind of working together, right? And you know, I find it very interesting when I'm coaching some of my clients, actually most of them, I'll say something like, have you ever thought of, they ask me a question about how to do something or whatever, and I said, you know what if we looked at it this way? What if this is the question that you asked? And they say, golly darn, that's exactly, I know exactly what to do now. It's this. That's right. As an insider, of course, you know what to know. As a leader, you know your business. So I think it's fascinating. I love technology. I do. Certainly at the Brain Trust, we use it for almost everything, but we actually use people too, because it's those conversations that sometimes you can't have. Okay, and we want to solve that we don't know what we don't know problem, and the only way to do that is to have that conversation.
I want to build on what you both said. You cannot have digital transformation without first understanding what technology can do and cannot do, which is, as Donald just said, the unsolvable problem because we don't know what we don't know. So right now, an approach I'm sort of playing with in my head is if I can assume that AI and tech can solve all my problems, almost all my problems, where science fiction is now reality, what's left? What's left is the human only traits of creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, ethics. So I guess I wanted to flip my thought to Randall. If we can, digitize so much and email market the everything out of everybody, what's left, the human touch that's needed in our strategy and in our touch points to make it all gel together.
You know what? We used to say, and I guess we still say in a certain sense, a computer doesn't sign your engagement letter. A computer doesn't sign your contract. Okay, a person does. But nowadays we have agentic AI that actually is doing that on behalf of people, and that's going to be certainly a lot more of the future. Rania, I think what you said, what you just said is just a superb answer. Whether it's a question of ethics, whether it's a question of relationships, whether it's a question of pure creativity and so on. All those things are really, really the answer. And I don't know if I need to add much more to it, frankly. That was a good one. I will say though, however, and I'll give you an example, give everyone an example of this. Have you ever been in one of those situations where you're texting? And we all know about texting, right? Somebody texts you something and you say, "Oh," and then you text back. And they're probably saying, "Oh," and then you're texting back and you're getting back and forth, and it's almost like the temperature's rising and people are getting agitated and everything. And finally you say, "Oh, forget it. I'm just picking up the phone. I'm going to have this conversation." And whatever was going on and assumptions you're making in the text, and uh, when you're actually having the real conversation, you can get to the nub of the issue. Oh, I thought you meant this. Oh, you wanted to do this. Oh, okay, I got it. Okay. Oh, and by the way, how about so and so? Right? And so I think in a certain sense, we're getting to a point where ChatGPT and Claude and all the other tools can do so much. That pendulum is sort of going, say, well, for some people, let's just do it this way, right? And some of those things, Rania, that you mentioned, okay, might have been forgotten a little bit, right? Because we're so using a tool. For other people, on the other hand, they're not using the tool at all. And they're wondering, why they're being left behind. Or sometimes they don't even know kind of what's possible, why or what. But I think that the idea of saying that human to human connection isn't just something that's unique and everything, but it's also where there can be out-of-band epiphanies that actually happen that are these leaps of logic that right now are not really possible with AI. They may eventually be. In this keynote, I play this game with the audience. I call it Guess the Word. And as if I'm a talk show or a game show host, and I say, please fill in the next word. Old MacDonald had a,
Farm.
yes. And then how does the song go? E-I-E-I-O, right? If I could ask all those, is that the glass is half full? Right. So,
Empty.
or empty. But that's kind of how that's the that's kind of the way AI works. You feed in a whole bunch of stuff, and it's got this huge, large language model in the background, and it sort of guesses the next word. However, where the intuitive leaps. So, for example, people are looking at my office and they're thinking, "Oh, that's a neat idea. Look, there's plaques on the wall or books in the back or whatever it happens to be. Gee, I think Randall might be STEM." So even though we're engaging at a certain level, you as somebody who's watching this video or having a conversation will notice all these other things and say, "Hey, I wanted to know about such and such." So you fine, we could talk about such and such. Then magically, okay, you say, "Hey, that sparks an idea in my mind. What do you think about this? Or what do you think about that?" And right now, that kind of interaction, and I don't want to say it's relationship based because it's really more of an issue of new inputs coming in that you might not have realized, okay, is not exactly at all how Chat GPT or Claude or any of these others work. Okay, then you put the relationship dimension on it, and that becomes something completely different because, you know, every time there's an interaction, the relationship will change. It'll hopefully get better and better and better. right? It can also change in the opposite direction, but that's another case. That's not the case with AI, at least not at this particular point, right? And so this is something that I think is unique. And when it comes to saying digital transformation or strategic transformation for an organization, we don't want to lose this aspect of it, right? We don't want to lose this particular aspect of it.
I have a question, Randall, about speed of decision making, speed of execution. Okay. With that, we're going to break right here, this part one on digital transformation. We'll pick up with more Q&A in part two. But if anything we've talked about so far resonates with you, if you're curious about business growth coaching or how to better align your team with group sessions or leadership retreats, we'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. Do reach out at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30 and see you back for part two.